Imagine you wake in a place you've never been before. Your eyes flutter open, adjusting to the hazy light. You're surrounded by unfamiliar shapes and silhouettes. At first, you can't make them out. An ache resonates through your body. Time feels warped. Memories swirl in your mind, searching for anchors, for fragments of what came before. You try to recall your name and then something deeper, who you really are. But as you peel back the layers of your mind, you find only faint echoes. A voice inside whispers, "This is me, isn't it?" But a darker echo replies, "Are you sure?" It begins like that, a quiet uncertainty, a nagging question. You feel you should know yourself intimately by now, more clearly than anyone else. Yet in moments like these, in the twilight between sleep and wakefulness, between confusion and certainty, you realize the lines of who you are aren't so neat. You may even sense that the certainty you cling to, that unwavering knowledge of who you truly are, deep down, might be little more than a comforting lie. What if that's true? What if the idea of your true self is merely a story you've been telling yourself all along? A story handed down by your parents, your culture, your experiences. A story you keep repeating so you can believe you have an immutable core that grounds you in reality. A story that spares you the anguish of a life untethered, spinning aimlessly in a void. This is the suspicion that creeps upon you. It's the primal disquiet that makes your heart pound when you think you've lost your way, your identity, your sense of belonging in this world. And yet, for all its disquiet, that suspicion might also open a gateway to truth, if you dare to look. Because here's the paradox: you think you know yourself, but you're also a stranger to yourself. You're hidden behind layers of pretense, illusion, cultural programming, and self-deception. Perhaps you try to peel away these layers, hoping to strike at the core of who you really are. But at every layer you shed, at every identity you discard, you find another layer. Is there a final, unbreakable truth in there? A sacred essence waiting to be uncovered? Or do you peer into an endless corridor of mirrors, each reflecting a different face, a different possibility of you? Think about it. Close your eyes if you wish and reflect on the last time you felt completely certain about yourself. Perhaps you walked into a room, head held high, confident that you knew your strengths and weaknesses, your beliefs and your purpose in life. But if you trace that confidence to its origin, can you pinpoint the moment you decided, "Yes, this is who I am. This is my core"? Or did it just happen along the way, an accumulation of habits, roles, and expectations that calcified into a shape you call me? Carl Jung suggested that much of what we call ourself is a compromise, a fragile balance between our conscious persona and the neglected, often hidden, aspects lurking in the shadow. It's as if you craft a mask to show the world so you're accepted, praised, validated. Meanwhile, in the dark recesses of your psyche, you banish what doesn't align with that mask: your fears, desires, impulses, memories. You might say, "But I know my shadow. I'm aware of my darker side." Yet how much of that recognition is, again, only a performance? A curated admission of small sins and minor flaws that allow you to say, "See, I'm authentic. I'm real." All the while, deeper truths remain buried, even from yourself. Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "Become who you are." That bold imperative might be the greatest challenge of your life. Because to follow that call, you must relinquish the comforting illusions that keep you safe. You must question your dearest beliefs, your moral convictions, and even the narratives you hold about your own suffering. You must pierce the illusions that you have arrived at some fixed point, some final statement of identity. Become who you are suggests you're not yet that person, that you're a river in constant flux, shaped by forces within and without, and that the you of tomorrow might look at the you of today with astonishment or even pity. The question remains: are you willing to let go of the idea that you've discovered your final, true self? But maybe you cling to the concept of a true self because it offers a semblance of security, a center around which your life can revolve. After all, the alternative seems frightening. Schopenhauer wrote of the will, an indomitable, ceaseless striving that underpins existence. If you took away your illusions, if you stripped yourself down to that raw will, that unstoppable craving, would you even recognize yourself anymore? Or would you become just another manifestation of nature's blind push, a creature bereft of meaning, scrabbling in the dark? You might feel a chill at the thought, so you cling. You cling to a story of essence, that there is a real you, a soul or psyche or essence that sets you apart from all others, something that existed at birth or even before it, some divine or cosmic blueprint. And perhaps it's that precious belief that comforts you when times are bleak. You tell yourself, at least I know who I am, and no one can take that from me. But have you questioned how that story formed? At what age did you first think, this is me? Maybe you were 5 and someone praised your drawing skill, so you declared, I'm artistic. Maybe you were 12 and someone mocked your singing, so you decided, I'm not musical. Perhaps you were 20 and a professor admired your analytical mind, so you concluded, I'm logical, not creative. Layer by layer, life shaped the persona you carry. You stitch these patches of praise, criticism, trauma, and triumph into a quilt, and you wrap that quilt around yourself, calling it your core identity. But is it truly who you are, or just the patchwork of stories you never bothered to unthread? Dostoevsky wrote about the subterranean depths of human consciousness, the places we fear to tread because they reveal truths we'd rather not face. You see, there's power in illusions. They help us cope, help us belong, help us create meaning in an often chaotic universe. So we construct elaborate myths about a true self, a self that's pure or noble or worthy. Maybe it's the self that suffers nobly, or the self that must remain misunderstood, or the self that must fight for control in a threatening world. Each myth is a fortress. You guard it. You embellish it with moral convictions, justifications, and intellectual arguments. You cling to it because behind those walls you feel safe. But deep down, you sense the fortress is built on uneven ground. A single quake of doubt and the foundation cracks. And when the cracks widen, you panic. You lash out or withdraw, because the potential collapse of your fortress means the collapse of your illusions. The collapse of your illusions suggests you never truly knew yourself. Ask yourself this: is your fortress trembling right now? Perhaps you're feeling a subtle heaviness in your chest, as if something inside you wants to break free, something not quite in line with the story you've constructed. Maybe it's a little spark of desire that's contradictory to your official self, or an overlooked ambition that doesn't fit your usual narrative, or an urge to dismantle everything you've built just to see what remains. When these sparks appear, you have a choice: bury them deeper, pretend they don't exist, or bravely let them burn. Let them torch the illusions of who you think you are. Let them reduce your fortress to ashes. From those ashes, something new might emerge. That something may be more raw, more honest, but also more frightening, because you won't immediately know how to define it. That's the essential tension of self-discovery, the death of illusions and the birth of possibility. You might say, but this is too much. I need a stable identity to function. I can't walk around uncertain of who I am. True, there's a functional aspect to identity. We need reference points to navigate the world. You can't constantly question your name, your preferences, your moral compass. Life would disintegrate into a swirling mess of indecision. But perhaps once or twice in a lifetime, or if you're daring, once or twice each decade, you can question those reference points at a deeper level, not to become paralyzed, but to refine your vision, to see where you've been clinging to a hollow sense of self, to see if you've trapped yourself in a storyline that no longer serves you. Think of it like traveling. You might take the same path every day, certain it's the only way to go. But then one day you stumble across a hidden trail that leads into the unknown. You pause. Should you stay on the familiar path or venture off? That unknown trail might open up breathtaking vistas you never dreamed of, or it might lead you deeper into a dark forest of confusion. Either way, it challenges your assumptions of where you belong. Now, consider the roles you've been assigned or you've assigned yourself. Child, sibling, student, friend, lover, worker, artist, rebel, caretaker, skeptic. Each role tries to define you. Each one claims a piece of your psyche. You become adept at juggling them, shifting from one persona to another depending on the context. Over time, you hardly notice. It's second nature. until the day you look in the mirror and say, which part of this is really me? Are you the rebel who hates authority, or the obedient child who still wants parental approval? Are you the free spirit who loves exploration, or the cautious guardian who fears uncertainty? Are you the creative visionary or the pragmatic realist? Or are you simply all of it, in different moments, swirling in a chaos of contradictions? Jung would argue that you encompass all these potentials, but you integrate them unevenly, filtering out what doesn't conform to your primary identity. Nietzsche would push you to embrace the chaos, to will your own becoming, free from conventional moral shackles. Schopenhauer would remind you that beneath it all, you're driven by an insatiable will that seeks its fulfillment, often at the expense of reason and peace. So which is it? Which philosopher offers the truth? Or is each perspective just another lens, another half-truth, another vantage point in the labyrinth of selfhood? You might decide to pick a side. I'll be the free spirit. I'll be the rebel. I'll ignore everything else. But then, aren't you merely latching onto another persona, another label to prop up your self-image? Or perhaps you prefer the path of the obedient, moral, disciplined self? Is that truly who you are, or just a safe choice, a means to avoid conflict with the world? Soon, you find yourself asking, is there no core at all? The question stings. It threatens your sense of meaning. If there's no core, then who's living this life? Who's experiencing love, pain, hope, despair? Who's forging relationships, dreaming of the future, and reflecting on the past? In moments like this, it helps to remember that no fixed core doesn't mean nothing is there. It means you're fluid. The self can be seen as a process, an unfolding journey, but a journey that never ends. A dance between various drives, instincts, and influences. A play of opposites that can never be reduced to a single identity. Buddhist thought might tell you there is no self, at least not in the sense you commonly believe. Instead, there's a constant flux of changing conditions, a tapestry of causes and effects. That notion can be liberating or terrifying, depending on how tightly you grasp the idea of a permanent identity. Let's pause here for a moment. Take a deep breath. Allow the gravity of this possibility to sink in. What if you are not, in fact, who you think you are? Not in the absolute sense, not in the sense of a static true self. What if your real nature is change itself, an ongoing metamorphosis that never settles, never truly arrives? A living question rather than a final answer. Sit with that uncertainty. Observe how it makes you feel. Perhaps a part of you resists. Another part feels oddly relieved. Another part is intrigued, maybe even excited by the endless possibility. This multiplicity of reactions is you, not some single voice, not some monolithic self, but a chorus of perspectives, impulses, and experiences coexisting within the mind. If you listen carefully, you might hear a new voice whisper. Maybe it's okay not to have a final identity. Maybe it's enough to keep exploring. But the world demands answers, doesn't it? The world wants to pin you down, to label you, to make you predictable. Employers want to know your skill set, your position, your future goals. Friends and family want to know where you stand, how you identify, what your beliefs are. Even romantic partners want to know if you fit their vision of who you ought to be. In the face of all these demands, it's tempting to declare, "This is who I am," and stick with it. Life becomes simpler. You avoid that anxious flutter of endless possibility. You get to say, "I've arrived at my truth," and for a while that might be enough. It might keep you going, help you function, help you bond with others. But some night, when you least expect it, as you lie awake watching shadows dance across the ceiling, a faint question will return. Is this really who I am, or just a role I'm playing? And the question will linger, softly gnawing at the edges of your consciousness. If you dare to follow it, you step onto a path that may disrupt your life. You might find yourself discarding old beliefs, losing friends who no longer understand you, leaving behind career paths that once seemed stable, or confronting family expectations that bind you. Because the pursuit of a more honest self often demands the collapse of the old facade. It's a kind of death, followed, if you persevere, by rebirth. But the beauty is, the rebirth might not be a single event. It might be a cycle, repeated multiple times throughout your life, each cycle unveiling a fresh layer of truth until, again, you question whether even that layer is real or just another fleeting identity. Some might call this existential crisis. Others might call it growth. The labels don't matter much. What matters is whether you choose to open your eyes to it or keep them closed. At this point, you might feel a certain heaviness or a certain calm. Perhaps your heart beats faster, or your mind spins with possibilities, or you feel an odd comfort that, at last, someone has voiced the question you've quietly asked yourself for years. Let's shift perspective for a moment. Let's entertain a metaphor. Picture a ship on the open sea. This ship is your identity. Over time, pieces of the ship get replaced. A plank rots, so you replace it with a new one. The sails tear, so you mend them or buy new ones. The mast cracks, so you rebuild it. Eventually, every piece of the ship will be replaced. Is it still the same ship? Where does the true ship exist if all its parts change? The ancient philosophers posed this riddle to make us question the idea of essence. Maybe the ship is just a concept, held together by memory and name. Similarly, your identity is maintained by memory, name, and continuity of consciousness. But the parts change, sometimes imperceptibly. Experiences alter your mind, your body shifts with age. Relationships come and go, each leaving a mark or a scar. And after a few decades, so much has changed that you barely resemble the child or teenager you once were. Yet you still say, "This is me." What if it's just a convenient fiction, like calling that ship by the same name even though every part is new? What if your true self is no more stable than a wave in the ocean, rising, cresting, and dissolving back into the depths? A wave has a shape, a form, a character, but it doesn't last. It can't remain frozen in time without losing its essence as a wave. Its identity is bound to movement. It exists only in becoming. So too, might you exist only in becoming. Does that make life meaningless? Not necessarily. It might imbue life with a strange freedom. The freedom to evolve, to adapt, to choose new directions without being chained to a rigid notion of self. The freedom to embrace paradox, to be contradictory, to be complex, to be alive. Nietzsche, in his own provocative way, urged humanity to break free of static dogmas and moral absolutes, so we might become something more than we are now, the overman, or at least an ongoing process of self-overcoming. He saw the potential for greatness in humans, but also recognized our tendency to cling to illusions that keep us comfortable and small. Your true self might be one of those illusions. A familiar comfort, a psychological safety net. If you cut it away, you might freefall into the unknown. That's terrifying, but maybe terror is the price of living authentically. Dostoevsky's novels often depict characters tormented by conflicting desires and beliefs, tearing themselves apart in the struggle to define who they are. In that struggle, he reveals the depth of human consciousness, the capacity for both cruelty and compassion, for piety and sin, for transcendence and depravity. We see that identity is not a tidy package but a battlefield, and from that battlefield emerges something raw and real. Now consider your own battlefield. The war you wage between conflicting desires, between your rational mind and your emotional needs, between your obligations and your cravings for freedom, between your curated self-image and those disowned parts of your psyche. Sometimes you find a truce. Sometimes a part of you wins. Sometimes all-out civil war breaks loose within you. All of this is you, not just one side but all sides. The problem arises when you try to reduce that complexity to a single dimension. I'm this kind of person and that's my true nature. The moment you do that, you split yourself in two. The part that fits this label and the part you repress. But the repressed part never goes away. It waits in the shadows, waiting for a moment of weakness or crisis. And then it surges forth, shocking you with its intensity, making you question everything you believed about yourself. That's how illusions often shatter violently in moments of crisis. If you never want to shatter, you can cling to your illusions forever. You can stay consistent with your persona, carefully ignoring any contradictory impulses. You can live a life half known, half expressed, half awake. But if you're watching this, maybe something in you wants more. Maybe you seek a deeper sense of reality, even if it's messy. Maybe you crave that unfiltered authenticity, even if it means dismantling the fortress. Maybe you're tired of playing the part of your true self and sensing there's something else, something unnamed, stirring beneath. This is your moment of invitation. To hold your illusions in your hands, examine them and decide which to keep, which to change, which to discard. Not because illusions are always bad. They can be useful, beautiful, even necessary at times. But it's the unconscious illusions that imprison you. Conscious illusions, on the other hand, can be wielded with purpose. You might choose to adopt a certain role or identity for a time, knowing full well it's a construct. You use it to navigate society, to create art, to connect with others. But you remember it's fluid, not a cage. Jung would tell you that integrating your shadow is crucial. That means facing the parts of you that you've denied, disowned, or demonized. It's not always pleasant. Sometimes it's downright horrifying. But each piece you integrate becomes a step toward wholeness. That wholeness, ironically, is not about finding a single, unchanging essence, but about embracing the many faces within you. Now, let's pause again. Take another breath. Ask yourself, which parts of me have I disowned? Which desires, opinions, traits, or vulnerabilities have I shoved into the dark, calling them, not me? How different would I be if I allowed those parts some light, some space to express? Would I find a new sense of aliveness, or would I spiral into chaos? Your reaction to these questions reveals something about the illusions you hold. Maybe you feel a quiet excitement, sensing the liberation that might follow. Or maybe you feel dread, preferring the comfort of the cage you know. Or perhaps you feel doubt, convinced this is all nonsense and that you are who you are, end of story. All these reactions are valid. There's no single correct response, just honest ones. In truth, the notion of a true self is ancient and pervasive. Religions often talk about an eternal soul, an essence that transcends bodily form. Psychology speaks of the authentic self, the genuine core beneath layers of social conditioning. Literature glorifies characters who stay true to themselves against all odds. Yet, for every argument that we have a pure essence, there's a counterargument that we're mutable creatures, shaped by time and circumstance, never quite the same from one moment to the next. You don't need to reject spirituality, psychology, or literature, but you might approach them with a nuanced perspective. When you encounter the idea of a true self, see it as a guiding star, not a final destination. Something that helps you navigate your life, but not something you must cling to as an absolute, because absolutes can become prisons. That's the ultimate irony. The more rigidly you hold on to "this is who I am," the more fragile that identity becomes. One unexpected event, one tragedy, one stroke of fortune, or one radical idea can smash it to pieces. Then you're left in crisis, scrambling to rebuild from the wreckage. But if you allow yourself to flow with the changing tides of existence, if you accept that who you are is an ongoing creation, you become resilient. You bend rather than break. You're not threatened by the idea that you could be someone else tomorrow, because that's the nature of growth. And what is growth if not the shedding of old skins to make room for the new? Now, let's explore a darker facet: power. Sometimes people cling to a true self because it gives them leverage. They say, "This is just who I am. Deal with it." It becomes an excuse for not changing destructive habits or toxic attitudes. It's a shield against responsibility. If you believe you're inherently a certain way, you might refuse to see how you can become something else. By believing in an unchangeable core, you might absolve yourself of the need for transformation. You can say, "I can't help it, it's in my nature." But that's often a lie to avoid the painful work of self-examination. If you recognize that you can change, you'd have to confront the fact that your faults and limitations are not necessarily permanent. And that awareness places the burden of action upon you. In a sense, the idea of a fixed self is comforting, but it can also be a prison that keeps you small. It stops you from dreaming bigger, from reinventing yourself, from challenging your limitations. Because if you truly accepted that you're a work in progress, you'd have to face the frightening truth that everything is up for revision. Your mind, your body, your beliefs, your relationships, your future. That kind of freedom is heavy. It demands courage. So ask yourself, do I cling to a true self out of fear of my own potential, fear of the unknown paths I might tread, fear that I could become a stranger to the people who know me now? Because, indeed, if you grow, you might outgrow them. If you reinvent yourself, some people won't recognize you anymore. That can be lonely, but it can also open the door to deeper connections with those who resonate with your new state of being. There's always a price. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. Now you might wonder how to live day to day without the comforting anchor of a true self. How do you decide what's right and wrong, what's worth pursuing, who's worth loving if everything is in flux? That's the essential existential burden, forging meaning in a world that refuses to give you a single, tidy answer. You do it by trial and error, by mindful awareness, by recognizing patterns of joy and suffering, by staying open to the voice of your conscience and the lessons of experience. You do it by letting your values evolve as you learn more about life, instead of locking them in stone. You do it by staying attuned to that sense of wonder that emerges when you embrace the mystery of existence. Yes, it's more complex than parroting, "This is who I am, this is what I do, end of story." But complexity is what makes you fully alive. At this stage, you might feel a strange mixture of emotions. A sense of disillusionment, perhaps, that the true self you clung to might be a mirage. Or a sense of release, a lightness in realizing you're not bound to any one identity. Or a sense of longing, wanting to find some deeper truth yet suspecting that truth might be ever-shifting. All are valid. Let them coexist within you. Notice how much space there is in your mind when you don't rush to shut down the tension. And remember, illusions aren't always the enemy. Sometimes they're the scaffolding we need to build ourselves up. But once the building is stable, maybe you can remove the scaffolding, or replace it with something more transparent, more flexible. Your illusions of self might have served you well so far, protecting you in turbulent times, helping you form relationships, giving you a sense of purpose. But you can honor them for what they were, temporary shelters. You don't have to keep living under their roof if you want to see the open sky. Let's draw on one more metaphor. A caterpillar becomes a butterfly. In the chrysalis, everything dissolves into a kind of primordial soup before reconfiguring into a new form. The caterpillar's identity literally disintegrates and something else emerges. Now, biologically, that metamorphosis might seem predetermined, but psychologically, you're not bound by such certainty. You can remain a caterpillar if you like, or you can allow the dissolution and see what form you take on the other side. Perhaps you do this metamorphosis multiple times in a lifespan, each transformation unveiling aspects of you that were dormant or undiscovered. And each time you might say, "This is who I truly am now," but you'll whisper in the back of your mind, "Until I change again." That's not hypocrisy. It's honesty. It's living the paradox of being a creature with a shifting identity. Now, let's consider how to close this reflection in a way that leaves you more free, rather than more confined. Perhaps you came here thinking you'd find a definitive answer. Yes, there's a true self and here's how to find it. Or no, there's no true self so nothing matters. But the real answer is more nuanced. The search for a true self might be misguided if you're looking for something permanent and unchanging. But it's deeply meaningful if it leads you to confront illusions, integrate your shadow, and embrace the fluidity of who you are. So maybe the question is not, what is my true self, but who am I becoming in this moment, and the next moment, and the next? Maybe the question is, which illusions serve me and which hinder my growth? Maybe the question is, can I find beauty and depth in the journey, rather than clinging to the destination? If you turn those questions into a daily practice, you may find yourself growing more comfortable with uncertainty. You might even discover a profound sense of peace in knowing that you're not confined to any single story. You can rewrite your script. You can shed old skins. You can surprise yourself and the world with new expressions of your being. That might be the closest you come to a real self, the ongoing act of creation, the relentless will, as Schopenhauer might say, that takes on different shapes and forms through the course of your life. The tragic and beautiful quest, as Dostoevsky might put it, of reconciling the contradictory elements within you. The heroic dance, in Nietzsche's terms, of becoming more than you were, of transcending the boundaries you thought defined you. And in Jung's view, the alchemical process of individuating, of turning the raw materials of your psyche into a more integrated, if ever-evolving, whole. So let this sink in. Let it resonate. And the next time you catch yourself declaring, "This is who I am," pause. Notice the hidden assumptions, the illusions, the patchwork of narratives that led you to that statement. Ask if it still reflects your deeper urges or if it's a relic of who you used to be. Ask if you're ready to outgrow it. If you are, be brave enough to let it go. If you're not, be honest about why you need to keep it. Because in that honesty lies your freedom. This is the quiet revelation of your human condition. You will never be fully known, not by others, not even by yourself. And that's not a curse but a gift. The gift of endless unfolding. A life not constrained by some predetermined essence but open to the richness of your own growth. Embrace it. Dare to dwell in the mystery. Let the fortress crumble if it must so something new can rise. And when doubt returns, as it surely will, greet it like an old friend. Let it remind you that you're not done yet, that there is no final, perfect unveiling of your true self. There is only the dance, the exploration, the continuing narrative that you write with every choice you make. This is the lie of your true self, that it's something fixed, static, and unchanging, waiting to be discovered like a hidden treasure. But in unraveling that lie, you find a deeper truth. You are the treasure in flux, a story that is still unfolding, a wave ever shifting, a chrysalis cracking open again and again, each form more astounding than the last. Let that realization fill you with awe, even if it tastes like fear at first. Let it carry you beyond the comforts of your old illusions, into a realm where self-creation is possible in every moment. And in that realm, let your life become a masterpiece of becoming. That's where the beauty is, where the terror is too. They're inseparable, but it is perhaps the only honest path. And if you choose to walk it, you might find that the idea of a true self pales in comparison to the vibrant, complex being that you continuously shape with your own hands. So leave here with that subtle shift in your heart. Know that you haven't received an easy answer, but an invitation to a different perspective, one that might unsettle you, might liberate you, might do both. The choice is yours. Remain inside the cocoon, or let the metamorphosis begin. No one can decide for you. No one can hand you your true self and say, "Here at last is the real you." Not your parents, not your lovers, not your teachers, not even your favorite philosophers. It's your journey, your dance with the unknown. And maybe that is the most authentic way to live, in awe of the process, open to what you can become, undefended enough to let life reshape you over and over again. In the end, this is your story. But it's a story best told with open-ended chapters. Because as you discover or create who you are, you realize it's not about arriving at a final conclusion. It's about the courage to write new pages, to reveal new facets of yourself, and to let old versions of you fade when their time has passed. That's the paradox. By giving up on the notion of a single, unshakable, true self, you discover the fluid, ever-evolving reality of being alive. It's not a tidy resolution, but it might just be the deeper truth you've been longing for. Now you decide. Will you cling to the fortress you built, or let it crumble so something else can emerge? The answer, whatever it is, will define your next chapter. And that chapter might be glorious, heartbreaking, transformative, or all of the above. There's only one way to find out. Step forward. Let your illusions slip through your fingers. And watch what grows in their place. Because that is where you meet yourself again and again for the first time.